Hi there, you're watching Reddit Confessions. Let's get right into it. Clarice dropped her spoon. Not in a dramatic way. Not like in the movies where silverware clatters and everyone gasps. No, it was soft. Intentional. Just enough for everyone to hear it. Just enough for everyone to stop chewing. And then she said it. If I could do it all over again, I'd choose someone else. No one breathed. Her mother blinked like she didn't understand the words. Her father suddenly found his wine glass very interesting. Wade, the brother-in-law with too many opinions, opened his mouth but for once said nothing. And me? I just sat there, my fork halfway to my mouth, a bite of overcooked chicken trembling at the edge of it. Like even the food didn't want to go through with this dinner anymore. Emma, our daughter, was the only one smiling. She had no idea what her mother's words meant. She was too busy stabbing a carrot with her tiny plastic fork and humming a tune from a cartoon I used to watch with her before Clarice told me she'd rather Emma grow up with real characters. There's something surreal about watching a room unravel while your brain refuses to catch up. I stared at my wife, Clarice, trying to figure out if it was a joke. If this was one of her too honest moments. She had those sometimes. Brutal honesty, she called it. I used to admire that about her. Now I just felt like I'd been sucker punched in the ribs. She didn't take it back. Didn't laugh. Didn't say, just kidding. She picked up her spoon, dipped it back into the mashed potatoes, and calmly asked her father if he'd remembered to water the orchids I bought them for Christmas. Everyone pretended. Everyone acted like she hadn't just murdered our marriage with a single sentence. I didn't sleep that night. At 2:03 a.m. I got up, walked to the bathroom, and looked at myself in the mirror like some sad ghost of a man who still thought love was enough. I wanted to scream. Instead, I flushed the toilet so she'd think I actually needed to pee and went back to bed. She rolled over and mumbled, "Good night." As if we were still okay. As if I didn't feel a slow, suffocating weight pressing down on me from the inside out. But here's where it gets worse. The next day, I found out she wasn't speaking hypothetically. And the man she would have chosen instead? He had been at that dinner. The very next morning, I found the confirmation. Not because I went looking for it, but because it fell into my lap like a slow-burning grenade. Clarice left her laptop open. Not unusual, she was forgetful when it came to closing tabs. But this time, it wasn't Pinterest recipes or overpriced yoga retreats. It was her email. And the subject line of the most recent message just sat there, bold and glowing like a wound. Last night was dangerous. I liked it. I stared at it for what felt like hours. My first instinct? Denial. Maybe it was an ad. Maybe it was spam. But my gut told me otherwise. My gut knew. I clicked. I clicked because I had to. Because part of me hoped I was wrong. Because the part of me that still loved her wanted to believe in some other explanation. But there he was. Wade. Her brother. Her actual brother? No, not by blood. Wade was her stepbrother. Her mother married his father when they were teens. But still, the emails didn't even try to hide it. They spoke in half-code like teenagers sneaking out of class. But it was all there. The rendezvous. The harmless flirting that had crossed a line months ago. The kiss they had shared in the laundry room while I was grilling burgers outside last weekend. The line that broke me was this: Lowell still thinks we're solid. He wouldn't recognize a crumbling wall even if it fell on him. I sat at the dining table, in the same chair where she said what she said the night before, and I couldn't move. I couldn't think. The clock ticked. The fridge hummed. The world didn't stop for my collapse. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just felt this slow, disgusting nausea roll through me, like someone had replaced my insides with cement. Clarice came back into the kitchen like nothing was wrong, holding her gym bag, chewing on a protein bar like she hadn't just shattered me into microscopic pieces. "Hey babe," she said. I looked at her, and for the first time in 10 years, I didn't recognize the person in front of me. I asked her, quietly, "How long?" She blinked, confused. "How long what?" I turned the laptop toward her. She didn't scream. She didn't deny. She didn't even look shocked. She closed the screen gently, like we were discussing what to order for dinner, and said, Do you want to talk about this like adults? Or are you going to fall apart again? That sentence. That calm, smug, rehearsed sentence. That was when the heartbreak turned into something colder. Not rage. Not yet. Just silence. I didn't say a word. I stood up, took my jacket, walked out the door, and didn't stop walking until my legs hurt. I ended up at the public library, my old job. I sat in the children's reading corner, alone, surrounded by colorful beanbags and dusty books, and I cried like a forgotten toy. I didn't know what to do. I still don't. I'm not built for chaos. I'm not some alpha guy who storms out with duffel bags and a 5-step revenge plan. I'm just Lowell, a guy who wanted love to be enough. A guy who tried to cook dinners and remembered anniversaries and built IKEA furniture without complaining. But none of that stopped her from choosing Wade. And the worst part? That wasn't the last line she crossed. Cracked slowly, like glass under pressure. I didn't scream. I didn't confront. I didn't even delete the messages. I just drifted, like I had been shoved into some alternate reality where my wife, my home, even my own name didn't belong to me anymore. For the next 2 days, I pretended. I smiled when I had to. I made Emma's lunch. I answered emails from school staff. I even texted Clarice back when she asked if I wanted Thai food. But inside, I was hollow. And the more I played along, the more I realized how much I had been playing along for years. Clarice wasn't just cheating on me. She had been gone for a long time. The emotional withdrawal? I blamed stress. The gym obsession? I called it motivation. The sarcastic comments about me being too gentle or not assertive enough? I laughed them off. But it was all right there. She had been building her exit, slowly, calculatingly. Brick by brick, lie by lie. And now, knowing she had crossed the line with Wade of all people, it made every memory with her feel contaminated. Every kiss, every vacation, even Emma's 3rd birthday party. When Wade dressed as a clown and Clarice said, "He's the only one who still knows how to have fun," I replayed that over and over. It all made sense. But it wasn't until Saturday afternoon that things got worse. That was the day I realized they weren't just having an affair. They were planning something. I had left my phone charging in the bedroom while I took Emma to her art class. When we got home, Clarice was in the kitchen, phone in hand, acting jittery. The second she saw me, she put it down face down, smiled too quickly and said, "How was class?" I shrugged. "Good." She painted a space dog. Clarice laughed, but her eyes kept darting to the counter where her phone was. Emma ran off to show her glitter-covered hands to the bathroom mirror, and I saw my chance. While Clarice pretended to check the oven, I tapped the power button on her phone just long enough to see the last notification. It was a preview of a voice message from Wade. I didn't hear it. I didn't need to. The caption alone told me everything. "Did you tell him yet?" The lawyer said the timing matters. My chest locked. I couldn't even feel my legs. There's a difference between betrayal and betrayal with a plan. She wasn't just cheating. She was setting me up for something. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I sat on the bathroom floor, hugging a towel like it was some kind of emotional shield. Around 3 a.m., I finally did what I swore I wouldn't. I called her sister, Fiona. Fiona and Clarice never really got along. They were polite to each other, but there was history, unspoken tension. I hoped that meant Fiona wouldn't side with her blindly. I told her everything. The dinner, the email, the message from Wade, the lawyer comment. There was a long silence on the line. Then Fiona whispered, "Oh my God, Lowell." She told me it was just flirting. I didn't know they were actually... She stopped. "Listen, you need to check your joint account. Tonight. Don't wait. Just do it." My hands were shaking when I logged in. I stared at the screen, and that's when my heart finally, completely collapsed. She had transferred out over $18,000 over the last 6 weeks, split into tiny chunks. Some labeled fitness, others labeled wellness, and one transaction, only one, was labeled correction. Correction? Correction for what? For me? For choosing me? I just sat there on the edge of the tub in complete silence. I felt like a man watching his own life being dismantled, dollar by dollar, memory by memory. like I was a guest in my own downfall. But the worst part was still ahead. Because the next morning, Clarice asked me to meet her at a hotel. She said she had something important to show me. And like the idiot I am, I went. Clarice told me to meet her at the Halwyn Inn, a small hotel just outside town that mostly caters to traveling salespeople and awkward high school reunions. She texted me the room number, 218. No context. Just that she had something to show me, and that it was important. I stood outside the room for a full 5 minutes, staring at the door like it might grow teeth. I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe I thought she wanted to apologize. Maybe I thought she'd come to her senses. Or maybe, deep down, I was still so hopelessly naive that I thought we'd talk through it like two people who once meant something to each other. I knocked once. The door opened immediately. Clarice stood there in a long black coat. Hair done. Lips painted deep red, the shade she only wore when she wanted to make a point. Behind her, the room was dimly lit. The curtains were drawn. There were 2 wine glasses on the table, half full, and 1 suitcase on the bed. "Come in," she said, like we were about to discuss the weather. I stepped inside, but I didn't sit. I kept my back against the wall like I was preparing to be arrested. The tension was so thick you could feel it vibrating through the floor. She closed the door gently, then turned to me. "I wanted to talk without Emma around," she said. I nodded. Still didn't sit. Still didn't speak. She went on. "I've been unhappy for a long time, Lowell. Years, if I'm being honest. And I didn't want to blindside you." I laughed, bitter and low. "You didn't want to blindside me? Clarice, I read your emails." She flinched for the first time. "Then you already know." She walked over to the suitcase and slowly unzipped it. Inside was a stack of documents, neatly organized. She pulled out a manila folder and handed it to me. "Divorce papers. Already signed. Dated. Filed. You're just done?" I asked. My voice cracked in that humiliating way I used to hear from my students when they got caught cheating on tests. "No conversation. No therapy. Nothing?" She looked at me with this distant, almost pitiful expression. "I've had the conversation in my head 100 times, Lowell. You just weren't there to hear it." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg. I wanted to ask her why she would destroy us, why Wade of all people, why she didn't just leave clean instead of poisoning everything on her way out. But instead, she took out one last item from her coat pocket. A check. Made out to me. For $2,300. "For what?" I croaked. "Your share of the joint account. The rest, well, you don't really need to know what it went to." That was it. That was the moment I stopped being Lowell, the husband, the father, the man who believed marriage meant something. I became something else entirely. Placeholder. An inconvenience being cleared from the path of whatever fantasy life she had convinced herself she deserved more. I folded the check. I put it in my pocket. And then I asked the one question I probably shouldn't have. Was Emma ever part of the plan? Or just the last piece to keep me quiet? Clarice stared at me. "Don't bring her into this," she said coldly. "She's the only thing we ever got right." And that broke me, because in her mind we were already over. Emma was no longer ours, just a shared project with a hard expiration date. I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked, my legs numb, my mind spinning, my mouth dry, my hands twitching to do something. But I wasn't even close to the bottom yet. Because the next morning, Emma asked me the question that finished what Clarice had started. "Daddy, why did Mommy say you don't love her anymore?" The morning after the hotel, I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch, motionless, the folder of divorce papers still sitting on the floor beside me like a loaded weapon. I couldn't even bring myself to touch it again. At 6:47 a.m., I heard small footsteps pad down the stairs. Emma, in her ladybug pajamas, hair messy, clutching her stuffed giraffe by the neck like she always did when she was nervous. She climbed up beside me on the couch and rested her head on my chest without saying a word. Her silence terrified me more than any scream could have. I wrapped my arms around her and kissed her forehead, trying to make it normal, trying to protect her from everything spiraling out of control. Then she whispered, "Did you say something mean to Mommy?" I froze. "What do you mean?" She said, "You don't love her anymore, and that's why we might have to live somewhere else." I wanted to throw up. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was blink back the burning in my eyes and ask as gently as I could, "When did she tell you that?" "Last night, before bed. She said we might go on a little adventure soon. Just girls." My hands went cold. My stomach twisted. She was grooming Emma for the exit, framing the story, turning the narrative before I could even begin to explain what was really happening. And what was I supposed to do? Sit my 6-year-old down and tell her her mother was cheating, lying, and moving money behind my back? I just held her and said, "No matter where you are, I will always love you. That's never going to change." But the moment she pulled away and nodded without smiling, I knew she didn't believe me. Not yet. That afternoon, while Clarice was out, I checked our bedroom closet. Half of her stuff was gone. Her winter coat, the black suitcase, her laptop bag. I checked the garage, her car wasn't there. I looked in her nightstand and found a printed itinerary. One-way tickets for 2 Clarice and Emma. Departure in 3 days. Destination: Portland. She was taking my daughter. Without a conversation. Without a court hearing. Without my consent. I sat on the bed and stared at the itinerary like it was a death sentence. Because in a way it was. She wasn't just divorcing me. She was planning to erase me. Erase our life. Erase me from Emma's future. I called her. No answer. I called again. Straight to voicemail. I texted, "We need to talk. Now." She replied 30 minutes later, "Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." Harder? She was the one who cheated. She was the one who emptied the account. She was the one who tried to flip our daughter against me. And now she had the audacity to act like I was the problem? I lost it. I wasn't proud of what I did next, but I was desperate. I drove to Wade's house. I hadn't been there in years, and pulling up outside felt like stepping into enemy territory. His stupid red truck was parked in the driveway. The porch lights were on, even though it was the middle of the day. I rang the doorbell once, then twice. When he finally opened the door, he didn't look surprised. Just smug. "Didn't think you'd come here," he said, arms crossed, shirtless like some kind of cheap cologne ad gone wrong. I didn't hit him. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I knew Clarice would use that against me. So I did something else. I pulled out my phone, hit record, and said, "You and Clarice have been seeing each other. Behind my back. And you're helping her take Emma. Is that right?" He raised an eyebrow, smirked. "I think you should leave, Lowell." I didn't. I stood there, hand shaking with the phone still pointed at him. "You're destroying a family." He leaned in just enough for the camera to catch his face clearly and said, "No, we're building a better one." I left before I did something I couldn't take back. That night, I slept in my car outside the house. I didn't want to be under the same roof. Couldn't. I kept imagining Clarice slipping out the back door with Emma and never coming back. But the story doesn't end there. Because what Clarice didn't know, what Wade didn't know, was that I had already made one quiet move of my own. And it was about to change everything. Let me take you back to what I meant at the end of the last part, when I said I had already made one move of my own. See, a week before the dinner that detonated everything, I had this strange gut feeling. It started with Clarice's tone. She was distant, calculating. I felt like she had already decided something, but hadn't told me yet. That kind of vibe, the quiet before a storm you can't name. So, without even knowing exactly what I was protecting myself from, I spoke to a lawyer. Not some big-time divorce pit bull. Just a local guy I trusted, Eli Hartman. He was the kind of attorney who wore wrinkled khakis and always smelled like peppermint. I told him, "I don't know if my marriage is ending, but if it is, I want to be ready, especially for my daughter's sake." He didn't ask a million questions, just nodded and said, "Let's get you some insurance." We drafted a parental custody affidavit. We documented every financial transaction tied to my account. We pulled copies of our marriage license, Emma's birth certificate, and all recent medical records. I even signed a preliminary custody petition, not to file yet, just to have it ready. That folder sat in a fireproof lockbox in the garage, until that night after I slept in the car. The next morning, I walked into Eli's office and dropped it on his desk. "It's happening," I said. "She's planning to take Emma. She's already booked tickets." He looked at me, nodded, and said the words I didn't know I needed until that moment. "Then let's make sure she can't." He filed an emergency custody motion by noon. Clarice didn't know. Not yet. I kept acting like nothing had changed. We barely spoke in the house, only the bare minimum for Emma's sake. She still believed she was 3 days away from boarding a flight to Portland and vanishing with our daughter into a shiny new life with Wade. But the papers were already moving. The judge scheduled the hearing. I would be notified. She wouldn't. Not yet. Meanwhile, I kept pretending. That was the hardest part. Sitting across from her at dinner while she texted Wade under the table. Watching her tuck Emma into bed and whisper lies into her ear. Telling myself over and over again, "Just a little longer. Just hold on. You're almost there." But even as I waited, things kept getting worse. Clarice had become bolder. 2 nights before the planned flight, I found her whispering on the phone in the backyard, barefoot, pacing like a teenager sneaking around after curfew. I stepped outside and asked, "Something wrong?" She jumped, turned to me, and snapped, "Privacy, Lowell. Jesus, you don't have to hover." I almost said it then. I almost told her everything was already in motion, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "You left your travel folder on the kitchen counter. I put it back in your bag." Her eyes went wide for just a second. She tried to hide it, but I saw the panic. She hadn't meant for me to see it. I caught her slipping. That's when I knew she wasn't invincible. She was reckless now. Sloppy. The next day, I received a call from Eli. "Lowell, you need to sit down," he said. I did. "She's already hired a lawyer. One of the nastier ones in town. They're preparing to file a relocation case. But here's the thing, she doesn't know we beat her to it." I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Relief. Just a flicker. But it was there. Then he added, "And she made a mistake. Her lawyer submitted a draft that included Wade as an intended co-parenting figure. That may be enough to trigger a morality clause review." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means if we prove they were in a relationship while she was still married to you and planning to bring Emma into that living situation, it could completely backfire. You might end up with full custody." I sat in my car outside Eli's office, phone in hand, and for the first time since that awful dinner night, I let myself smile. Not because I wanted to win, not because I wanted revenge, but because for once, I wasn't helpless. Clarice had built her new life on a fantasy. But the real world was about to remind her that actions have consequences. And I was going to let the truth do the talking. I didn't agree. I was done being quiet. The next morning started out deceptively normal. I made waffles. Emma covered hers in sprinkles. Clarice walked into the kitchen like nothing was wrong. Like our marriage wasn't a crime scene sealed off with red tape. She even complimented my cooking. "Looks golden this time. Not burnt," she said with a smirk. It almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because of how desperately she was clinging to the illusion. She had no idea the clock was ticking down to 0. That afternoon, I got the official call from Eli. The judge granted our emergency hearing. The court date was locked, 24 hours before their planned flight. One day, that was all I had to survive without tipping her off. And then, something unexpected happened. Clarice's mother called me. We hadn't spoken one-on-one in over a year. Not out of bad blood, just distance. She always preferred talking through Clarice. But this time, her voice was quiet, hesitant. She said, "Lowell, can I ask you something personal?" I braced myself. "Sure. Did something happen between you and Clarice? And Wade?" Silence. I didn't even breathe. She continued, "Clarice said you're becoming unhinged, that you're planning to sabotage her custody of Emma. But I saw Wade leaving her house late last night. And this morning, Clarice had 2 packed bags in the living room. That was it. She knew, or at least suspected. I told her the truth. Not all the messy details, not everything, but enough. Enough that her voice cracked. She whispered, "I had no idea. I thought she just needed space." Then she said something I didn't expect. "You don't deserve this, Lowell. You've always been the steady one. I'll talk to her. Maybe she can still." "No." I cut her off gently. "She's past talking. I'm not trying to ruin her. I just want Emma to be safe. And I'm not letting her get on that plane." That night, I did something that made my hands shake. I recorded a video. It wasn't for YouTube. It wasn't for Reddit. It wasn't even for a judge. It was for Emma, just in case. I sat in the living room with the lights low, looked into the lens, and said everything I never wanted her to hear too early. I told her how much I loved her, how none of this was her fault, that if she ever found herself wondering why things changed, why Mommy and Daddy weren't in the same house anymore, she could watch that video and know the truth had nothing to do with her. Then I backed up the file and hid it in a cloud folder only accessible to me and Eli, because I had no idea how far Clarice would go if she lost control of the narrative. The next day, the day before their flight, everything exploded. Clarice got served at work, right in the parking lot. She was stepping out of her car when the process server handed her the folder. She called me 30 seconds later, voice sharp, almost hysterical. "What the hell is this?" "It's what happens when you try to take my daughter across state lines without consent," I said calmly. Too calmly. It made her furious. "You vindictive little coward. You couldn't handle me moving on, so now you're playing victim?" "No," I said, still calm. "I'm not playing anything. I'm stopping you from rewriting the story without me in it." She hung up. 20 minutes later, I got an email from her lawyer, threatening, full of bluster. But it didn't matter. The hearing was happening, and I had everything documented: emails, money transfers, the flight itinerary, and yes, even a photo of Wade leaving the house overnight. Her own mother sent it to me. For the first time in weeks, I felt something strange. Hope. Not just for myself, but for Emma, for stability, for clarity. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have predicted, was what Clarice would do next. Because people like her, when backed into a corner, don't surrender. They burn the house down. I walked in that morning a man who'd been gutted by betrayal, afraid of losing his daughter, ashamed that he'd spent so long pretending everything was okay. But I walked out a different man. Let me tell you how. The courtroom was cold. Not physically, just in vibe. Clarice sat at the other end of the table in a stiff gray blazer, eyes forward, not once looking at me. Wade wasn't there, probably on standby, waiting for her to text him the outcome like some sick post-game summary. Her lawyer kept whispering in her ear, but Clarice didn't nod, didn't blink. She was still holding on to the fantasy that she'd win, that the judge would see me as weak, passive, forgettable. But Eli stood up and laid it all out. The money transfers, the one-way tickets, the emails, the voice message preview, the timing of it all. Most of all, he made it clear that this wasn't about 2 adults breaking up. It was about one parent trying to sever a child from the only safe constant she had left. Clarice's lawyer objected, claimed I was twisting things, that Clarice was seeking a healthier environment for Emma. And then, the judge asked Clarice directly, "Were you in an active romantic relationship with Mr. Wade at the time of these events?" Clarice hesitated, just long enough. Then, in the softest voice, she said, "Yes." That's when the room shifted. The judge issued an immediate custody injunction. Clarice was prohibited from relocating Emma out of state. The court would review full custody at a later hearing, but for now, Emma would remain in her home with me. The judge's final words were ones I'll never forget. "We cannot reward deception with custody." Clarice stormed out before I could even look at her. That was the last time I saw her in person. A week later, I sat down with Emma and explained that Mommy would be staying in another place for a while. She asked me if it was because I didn't love her anymore. I hugged her tighter than I ever had and said, "No, sweetheart. Mommy and Daddy just see things differently now. But I'll always be here. Promise. And I've kept that promise. It's been 5 months. Clarice moved in with Wade. From what I've heard, it's not going well. The fantasy life she built crumbled under the weight of real-life responsibilities. Emma visits her on weekends, supervised at first, then gradually longer. I never spoke badly about her mother in front of her, no matter how much I wanted to. That was the line I refused to cross. As for me, I started rebuilding. Not fast, not perfectly, but slowly. I go to therapy. I cook dinner every night. I read with Emma every evening before bed. And when I close her door, I stand there for a few seconds and let the quiet remind me, we made it. I'm not bitter anymore. I'm not hollow. I'm free. And if you're watching this, going through something similar, thinking you're too soft to stand up, too broken to fight, you're not. You don't have to scream to protect what matters. Sometimes quiet resilience is enough. What moment in this story hit you the hardest? Have you ever experienced something that started as ordinary and changed your life forever? Let us know in the comments. Subscribe to Reddit Confessions for more true, raw, unforgettable stories like this one. Thank you for watching. And remember, the truth always finds a way.